So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Oui, comme vous entendez, bien que j'habite maintenant à Montréal, je ne viens pas d'ici. Mais, et alors, plusieurs m'ont demandé pourquoi j'avais laissé le soleil et voilà. Le soleil et la chaleur des côtes australiennes pour l'hiver canadien et ses défis. Mais pour moi, les différences et aussi que les vraies similarités entre le climat, la géographie et l'écologie de l'Australie et du Canada m'intéressent et m'intriguent. Alors, pendant ces prochaines minutes, on va prendre un petit tour de nos deux grands pays et voir leur richesse biologique. We don't need to go very far to find our first examples, as every day we use products that are made from animal and plant resources that are known as provisioning ecosystem services. So, if you all think about what you just had for breakfast this morning, perhaps a pancake topped with sirop d'érable, or some fresh fruit, apples, or as those crops start to replace the raspberries that have just left our fields. And so biodiversity allows us such varied diets, fresh seafood, escargot, or perhaps even some of the Australian bush foods that are becoming more and more popular as an export, though apparently not with my boyfriend. And food is not the only resource that we directly use from biodiversity. We also have, I suppose, warm down clothing that keeps us warm. Fur perhaps as well, and then we keep warm as well in the winter with cozy wood fires and create useful or beautiful products. Pearl jewelry, perfumed sandalwood oil that's produced by trees that the wood is valued these days at about $100,000 per tonne. Or things like traditionally crafted bowls. This one here is a traditional Tasmanian Aboriginal carrying bowl created out of seaweed. So obviously we have a long history of using biological resources, but they also provide from this history many other values to our society, known as cultural values. For instance, the boab trees in northern Australia, which were used as prisons in the early days of European settlement. Huge hollow trunks that contained Aboriginal prisoners. The Aboriginal peoples in Australia, much as in Canada, have a long and tight connection with our ecosystems. Here I've got some rock carvings, also from northern Australia, but that relate to the totemic system of the Australian Aborigines. And it's not just the Aboriginal peoples who have this cultural connection. Right here in Ottawa, that's outside your National Gallery. And coming up very soon, Halloween. Pumpkins have a huge significance in that. And right here in our central, daily lives, this here is on Mount Royal, in our beautiful city of Montreal, used every day by hundreds of people, walking, running, cycling, relaxing. Or you could do as my partner and I did, and spend a year traveling, camping, living basically in the bush, and with some very cozy little neighbours as well. Or you don't even need to go that far to see how we can value it. Here's in Park Omega, which is a little bit further yes, northwest in Quebec. Or similarly in Shark Bay World Heritage Area in Western Australia, where we have, I suppose, what an economist would call indirect use of biological resources. And then we get on to extra things, like where we would feel what we learn as well from these cultural heritage experiences. Narracod Caves, another World Heritage Area in Australia, South Australia, and Gantillon Point, where dinosaur footprints have been found near Broome in the northwest coast. These records of what has already passed on Earth now help us in our educational institutions to learn more and hopefully to manage better into the future. Now, we've gone through some of the more obvious ecosystem services that are provided by biodiversity, but there are some that we don't necessarily think about every day, usually known as supporting services. Things like biomass production and just general habitat provision for wildlife, and habitats like the grasslands and deserts in Australia. You don't think necessarily that they hold a lot of life, but they do, very much like the Arctic ecosystems in the north here. It's pretty amazing that anything survives in those conditions, and we can learn a lot from that. And then other cycles, in particular nutrient cycling, goes at many levels, things like fungi, or vermicomposting with the worms, and scavenging. This is here as a Tasmanian devil, and very much enjoying his meal. And then even further, again, further cycles that support our life. Soil aeration that allows this productivity to develop in the ecosystems. Habitat changes and water cycling, for instance, managed by the beaver and burrowing crayfish in Tasmania. And one very important one. These may look like rocks, but they are some of the most important organisms on Earth, known as stromatolites. These are found in Shark Bay in Western Australia, and they are the reason that we're all here, because they produce our oxygen. So that leads me into the final type of ecosystem services that I've seen in my travels, regulating ecosystem services. The production of oxygen helps regulate our climate and our air. And if you think about recently, there was an oil spill in the Seaway, St. Lawrence Seaway, which kept one of the locks closed. I think it was for about 3 days. In that time, billions of dollars of economic productivity were lost, simply because ships could not travel through that seaway. So then, if you think about changing climate, and this year the seaway is at record low levels, the water levels are record lows because of the low snowfall last winter. So if climate change continues, that becomes a regular thing. There's a major impediment to our economy simply because of changing weather patterns. Other things that can also directly impact our economy: storms, major storms, mangrove systems, for instance, which are often an highly endangered ecosystem, are an important part of preventing damage to our coastlines. And you can see here the damage that can occur when you remove such important vegetation and allow, in this case, dirt bikes free rein over a sand dune. It pretty much turns into dust and blows away. And then there's we even receive services from, I suppose, species that we wouldn't necessarily consider as helpful or nice. Spiders, for instance, most people might be afraid of them, but they help, for instance, with preventing disease spread. capturing mosquitoes in their webs. Or woodpecker. Perhaps it's eating away at your country cottage, but doing that, it's also helping prevent the spread of pests. And then this here is an endangered species of bird in Western Australia known as the malleefowl. It's fairly unique in that it creates large mounds of organic matter and soil to incubate its eggs. But in this process, scraping up the undergrowth in the forests helps prevent forest fires, which, as you may have heard at the beginning of last year, have been devastating in various regions of Australia. So, we've seen that there's plenty of things that we get from biodiversity, but sometimes that's forgotten when we consider opening a new mine, or we do need some of these products from forests, and we need agricultural land. But we do need to take into account these ecosystem services in environmental planning. There are many ways that we do that, and generally try to, I suppose, balance in some fashion ecology with economic and social considerations to get some conservation measures through. So that might be through environmental assessment or through socioeconomic analysis. I performed one looking at the Inuit beluga hunt in Nunavik, northern Quebec, and found that for the Inuit communities up there, the value of the hunt, of the meat that they received from the hunt, they would have had to pay twice as much, nearly 3 times as much, to get that same amount of food and nutrition from a local store. Or I've also done some work in what's known as reserve design, which it uses a computing program to balance these ecological and economic factors through time and across space. And this one here that I performed was in a rural region of Western Australia, looking at the conservation of the malleefowl that we saw on the previous slide on private land. And so I found that if we could conserve these 2 areas of bushland to expand their habitat, we could get a 500% increase in the population and greatly increase their chances of survival in that region for very little output, around $5 million of work with the farmers. But I guess with the malleefowl and also the beluga, we were lucky enough in those cases to know enough about the species to be able to do something as significant as these studies, as detailed as these studies. So what happens with all of those species, all of those ecosystems that we really don't know anything about, if we even know that they exist?